No one bullies people who regret their knee surgery. True. Oh my God, true. This is what I mean. We're a politicized group. There's an impetus for us to say things are good whether they are or not. 61 to 98% of trans youth. What you've done is pointed out correctly that one person in an interview, that being this person here,
you're anti-trans.
Yeah, I'm going to have a look at this video. We got debunked. 61 to 98% of trans youth desist during puberty. And we have essence of thought. The myth, the legend, the man. I mean, sorry, not man. That's totally not what this person is. Anyway, here we go. Man should be called Ethel Thurston and this she, her, they, them. Listen, I have all sorts of like band names for stupid fucking hardcore bands I want to start but never will. That's now one of them. Thank you. But yeah, let's have a look.
Have you ever heard the claim that if we take a wait-and-see approach with regards to trans youth, 60, 70, 80, even 90% of children who display signs of gender dysphoria will desist as they go through puberty?
Yeah, so I'm familiar with what Ethel is talking about, to be clear. So we have, for example, Singh et al., Corte et al. A lot of them are saying that kids change their minds. A lot of them will desist on their own. We've got more. We've got Steensma is here, one of them. Steensma, I think, is the 69-ish%. Yep, Thomas Steensma. This is based on like studies, to be clear. That doesn't mean it's correct, but it's based on something. So I'm interested in seeing how Ethel Thurston is going to deal with it.
Where does this assertion come from? What linguistic trick is being played on the listener? And
no linguistic trick has to be being played. This is going to be dumb, isn't it? This is going to be dumb. Listen, good faith. We're being kind. We're being nice. Let's see. Let's give the benefit of the doubt.
how can we better equip ourselves to debunk said lie in public? That's what we'll be tackling in today's video. But first, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, intermisia, reparative torture, child abuse, and suicide. If our work has helped you, please consider supporting us via Patreon so that we can keep the channel running.
Do not do this. Do not do that. You are dead to me if you give this person money. I'm sorry. This person is not doing anything to help anyone, in my opinion. And beyond that, this person literally has a history of like harassment and abuse of others, especially someone called Rachel Oates.
You can also help us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston.
Yeah, you can help Ethel Thurston by liking her video. There we go. So that's an example of liking the video. Anyway, but if it's my video, you want to click that one, not that one. But I'm helping Ethel out. There we go. Nice. Intermisia, yep.
She, her, they, them, and it's time to debunk on social media. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston. She, her, they, them, and it's time to debunk the assertion that anywhere between 61 to 98% of trans youth desist if we take a wait-and-see approach. And it's important to do.
Have you ever heard the music from that? One Twitter, she, her, not a man. OK Gallagher. I've not heard of that person. Screamy, weird, heavy metal music. I can't tell whether that would be more or less entertaining to me. I don't know. I like all the shitty folk punk artists like fucking Sophie Molly. Like, just thinking about it, I want to just play fucking Sophie Molly songs, but I better not. I better behave. Transmisia. Yeah, it's, I've heard like literally Ethel Thurston and like one other person say transmisia. Please consider aborting my Patreon. Abortions are good to these people. You got to understand. Show one like button. Hey, maybe.
Do so since, whilst this claim began online, it has somehow managed to claw its way into.
This is like the most happy mask salesman shit. Has anyone played Majora's Mask beyond like the first half an hour of the game? This reminds me of the happy mask salesman, the way his face just like abruptly changes so often. Anyway, I need to stop pausing. I need to stop listening. Ethel Kane. No, this person is called Ethel Thurston or Ethel Thurston, according to themselves. Listen, you have to understand something. All these people stole their old lady name idea from me. Like, I've been trans longer than any of these people, so, hey,
Important to do so since, whilst this claim began online, it has somehow managed to claw its way into the political sphere.
This claim began online. When was this study from? Like 2013, and I think he had a previous study from like 2011.
Being invoked by actual legislators as justification to ban gender-affirming care, most notably puberty blockers.
Seems very empty, cynical. Very empty and cynical so far, but let's see.
For example, the Lieutenant Governor of Arkansas, Leslie Rutledge, as seen in this incredibly painful interview with Jon Stewart.
Well, I know that there are doctors and that we had plenty of people.
All right. I've seen this. She does not do a good job, but Jon Stewart doesn't either, to be clear.
Come and testify before our legislature who said that, we have 98% of the young people who have gender dysphoria, that they are able to move past that. And once they have the help that they need, no longer suffer from gender dysphoria. 98% without that medical treatment.
That's an incredibly made up figure. That doesn't.
What? Why does he get to say that? Oh, that's just made up. Like, it's not made up. Like, there is evidence. You can say you disagree with the evidence. For example, what was it? Steensma et al. Here's a criticism you can make of this study. The sample consisted of 127 adolescents. That is not a very big sample size. But to just come out and say, oh, that's completely made up. But at the same time, his side are absolutely happy to make up the detransition rate based on just reading one study. So like, I don't know. This isn't helping me trust anyone, honestly.
That medical treatment.
That's an incredibly made up figure. That doesn't.
It's just smug bullshit. Like, isn't this guy meant to be a journalist? Isn't this guy meant to be like respectable? It might be made up. It's not made up. Like, it'll come from one of these studies. That doesn't mean it's correct, but it's not made up. He is being like immediately cynical for no reason, it seems. No, it's not made up. Listen, I'm not going to argue with you. It's not made up. It might not be true. It's not made up.
That medical treatment.
That's an incredibly made up figure.
And he's being a dick, whether you like it or not. I'm sorry for this kind of attitude.
That doesn't comport with any of the studies or documentation that exists from these medical organizations. What medical association are you talking about of these doctors?
Well, we have all of that in our legislative history, and we'll be glad to provide that to you.
Yeah, and like I said, she doesn't do a very good job here either. He's not respectable. He's a comedian. Okay, fair enough.
I don't have the name of that off the top of my head. I know it's something that...
You don't have the name of the organization that
off the top of my head.
Oh, okay.
But yes, we have all of that cited in all of our briefs.
You're suggesting that protecting children means overriding the recommendations of the American Medical Association.
And then the hollow appeal to authority. Well, I'm just going to trust what all these associations say. For what reason? I don't know.
American Association of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society.
We don't have enough data. We don't have enough to show that these drugs are effective and that these children are better off, and that we should encourage these.
The main place I've heard transmisia from is Josh Moon. I'm not scared of them. I just hate them. Jesus. That's quite funny in a way.
Or it's not enough for you.
So how do we end up in a situation where, as John rightfully notes, every reputable medical institution
just saying that he's right. Like, based on what?
Stands firmly in support of gender-affirming care, including fully reversible puberty blockers, yet Rutledge is so confident in her claim? Well, it all comes down to the terminology, namely how researchers have defined gender dysphoria.
The 98% figure, by the way, is just one figure. The studies show different things. So me personally, I would not be comfortable saying 2% of children that experience gender dysphoria will continue to experience gender dysphoria. I would be uncomfortable saying that because I don't think that's true. But like, we're pretending that it's just A, based on nothing, and B, the only claim that anyone makes here, based on one interview with a guy that's being a dick.
At different points in time. For you see, whilst the conclusion being drawn here is fallacious, the number isn't made up in the way Jon Stewart claims. It actually comes from
Hey, actual truth, well done.
my 2016 paper, which was published in the International Review of Psychiatry, titled Gender Dysphoria in Childhood, and is included in Table 1.
Distance rate. 2%. Yeah, this is a meta study. So we've got persistence rate. 2% is like one of the figures. So really you'd want to average it. So the persistence rate, 9%, 2%, 12%, 39%, 12%. I don't know. Let's pluck a number out the air. About 20% would be maybe a better way of representing this meta study, right?
With said data having come from a 1987 source. Now, the first thing that might lead someone to realize that there's something at play here is the way in which anti-trans bigots usually only take this one single source, discarding the 9 other sources on the table that show desistance rates ranging from 61 to 91%. This is the very definition of cherry picking. The total desistance rate for all 10 sources combined is 85.1%, which is a number I will use going forward. Another thing
Yeah, that's still high, bro. You gotta understand that. It's still high.
That might lead one to question the validity of said data is its source, namely Richard Green's The Sissy Boy Syndrome and the Development of Homosexuality, which is not a peer-reviewed study, but rather a non-peer-reviewed book. This means it has not gone through a rigorous checking process like an actual
Peer review, I don't think, is as meaningful as these people pretend. You can get something presumably peer-reviewed by finding another person that believes all the same shit you do and just get them to sign off on it. Like, whether it's peer-reviewed really only carries so much weight.
study, nor did Green have to declare any conflict of interest, meaning his biases could run rampant.
Say that about almost any of them.
Speaking of, there's the title of the book. Richard Green was a supporter of reparative torture, often dishonestly labeled as reparative or conversion therapy. The reality is, said methods are anything but therapy and have been denounced internationally for the measurable
See what I mean about the happy mask salesman shit? This is like so distracting.
psychological harm they inflict upon their victim. To give you an idea of just how destructive said methods are,
Like, you're making him sound bad, sure. Does that mean that none of his science has anything to it whatsoever? You can pay for peer reviews now. Yeah, I'm sure, like, if you want to get something peer reviewed, it's probably pretty fucking easy. And it probably matters little, ultimately, into how good your science is. You know what I mean? Especially when if like, scientific institutes are, like, captured or whatever, or, like, scientists are very divided and want to either push one thing or another, you can probably easily find someone that'll sign off on it just because it sounds good for their side. You know what I mean? Sources don't need to be peer reviews. There are origins of expressions used, paragraph copied, etc. Yeah.
are the average rate of attempted suicide amongst LGBT plus youth within the US is 8%, which is actually 1% lower than the national average. Reparative torture increases that 8% to 42% among all LGBT plus youth combined, and 57% among trans youth specifically. That is a 5 to 7-fold increase and is merely one of the ways we observe the harm caused by said torture.
But we're not talking about harm, we're talking about whether the science has any weight to it. Like, just because it's harmful, like, that doesn't make any sense.
It therefore comes as little surprise to discover that Green worked alongside monsters such as John Money to try and torture LGBT.
Guilt by association, yay! But how's the science bad, though? You're not actually debunking anything, you're throwing shit, is what you're doing. And by the way, listen, I agree with what this person is saying. Oh my god, it looks like Ethel's met a terrible fate. Yes, Jesus Christ. How do you know it's me that's met the terrible fate? Because I'm looking at this shit in the first place. So what she's saying about the 98% statistic is fair enough. It is like cherry-picked, for sure. But we're talking about the 61 to 98%. Like, and we're already getting off track. We're already talking about how this one guy was bad.
Plus people, both adults and children, in an attempt to turn them allo-cis-het. Of course, said methods do not work, but merely force their victims to hide who they are in order to escape said.
No offense, I don't trust what you're saying. I can't really be bothered to dig into it that much because that's not the claim I'm here to, like, think about. I'm wondering about this. What she's saying here is pretty irrelevant and kind of seems like it's in here so that it colors your perspective of these people to make you want to not like them rather than think that they're wrong about anything, you know?
violence. John Money famously attempted to transition a cis boy, David Reamer, who'd had his penis destroyed as part of a botched circumcision in order to prove that gender was purely taught and could thus be controlled, an argument he made for the forced reassignment of intersex people, arguing that all intersex infants should be surgically mutilated and reassigned female.
Here we go. John Money is bad, actually.
Money presented David as a resounding success to the
I don't know what allocishet means. One sec. Allosexual. I love it. What does allo mean? Allosexual. Okay. Experiences sexual attraction. We needed a word for that. We needed a counterpoint to asexual, which I'm going to be honest, I tend not to believe people when they say they're asexual. I think it's very rarely true. It's a bit like those people that go on constantly about how they just don't want to be in a relationship. And then one day they're like shacked up with someone and it's like the quickest relationship in the history of fucking relationships. That's what it reminds me of. And hey, I don't know. Maybe people are more honest about the shit than I'm saying. I just don't believe most people. That's just how I feel. What are they trying to say with this example? I don't really know. They're just putting the boot in a whole lot. Like, they made an actually fairly okay point, being that 98% is like from within a meta-study and it's one study in a meta-study. Like, that's fair enough. I agree with that. But then we're already poisoning the well a whole bunch.
The medical community.
A lot of these people think gender is taught and can be controlled. See, it's a funny one because I fully believe that these people want things like gender and sex to be completely choice-based. Just you come up with that and that's what you are. And you're the one in control. You're the one that gets to decide what you are and stuff like that. Which I disagree with. Like, but they're trying to often present it like it's something innate. Like, gender identity is an innate part of you, which there's just no evidence for. Like, it kind of seems more like people just coin these phrases, these identities, and that's all there is to it. So I don't know. There seems to be this illusion of it's innate, but it really isn't. They want it to be something you get to choose.
Asserting that he successfully transitioned him into a girl, leading said position to be adopted as the official approach to visibly intersex infants. There's just one major problem. The fucker lied.
Excuse me. Sorry, my camera just popped by.
All he actually did was give David Reamer gender dysphoria to the point that David took his own life. Meanwhile, Reamer was so close to Money that he actually thanked him for inspiring
Oh, it's a guilt by association, so that's why he's bringing up John Money.
his own career in Money's obituary after David's suicide had already exposed Money for the fraud he was. So to say Green's non-peer-reviewed book is incredibly biased is a vast understatement.
No. You haven't really shown that. Guilt by association really isn't a way of showing bias, I don't think, anyway.
He, just like John Money, had every reason to lie. But
That pissed off one is so funny to me. Like, do you not see your own videos? Do you not see what it looks like? It's preposterous.
that still doesn't tell us what linguistic trick is being played on the listener. To understand that, we must look at the dates of the many sources. Not a single one was published after 2012, which is important because clinical gender dysphoria, that is to say high levels of psychological distress resulting from a mismatch between someone's birth assigned gender and their actual gender, didn't exist until the publishing of the DSM-5 in 2013. Ergo, when these studies use the term gender dysphoria, they are not referring to the clinical diagnosis we have come to associate the term with today. And the researchers have been very open about said fact, explaining such in a letter to the editor regarding an earlier analysis of the data, stating that, quote, across all studies, the persistence rate of gender dysphoria has been approximately 16%. What should be emphasized is that these studies did not use the fairly
strict criteria of the DSM-5. Would I describe it as fairly strict? I don't think I would, but sure. I'm transgender refers to a person whose sex at birth does not align with their gender identity. Gender dysphoria refers to psychological distress that results from an incongruence between one's sex assigned at birth and one's gender identity. I do not like this definition. I do not like this definition. Like, what's your gender identity? And why does it trump your sex? Why do you then move them to the other thing instead of dealing with it in any other way? Especially when your gender identity is just made up. This really isn't much of a point, honestly. It wasn't as standardized back then. But we still understand what it was. It's unhappiness with your sex or gender. That's all there is to it. It's a fairly simple concept.
Strict criteria of the DSM-5, and children could receive the diagnosis based only on gender variant behavior. With DSM-5 criteria, the persistence rate probably would have been higher. End quote. What this means is that the 85.1% desistance rate doesn't describe the portion of children with clinical gender dysphoria who would desist on their own, but rather the proportion of children referred to a gender specialist, often by an untrained adult, such as a parent, teacher, or school counselor, who are assessed, found to not be trans or to not require further medical support, and are thus sent on their merry way.
Yeah, but they don't send people on their merry way anymore. It seems like they treat almost everyone that comes through. Like, if we're to say that's a problem, are we not just having the opposite problem now? And that maybe because we're treating so many people, which is loading the dice, by the way, that therefore more people are persisting now. Is that not a possibility?
And the letter then goes on to explain how a previous peer-reviewed paper by said researchers showed key differences between persisters and desisters.
Gender identity is a pattern of all one wish for in life regarding gender. Yeah, it's just what you want to be, is what you want to be seen as, you know what I mean? When this person be against sending people on their merry way. Yeah, of course. They'll claim not to be the case. But anyone who transitions, they will say is trans, whether or not it's true.
Namely how, quote, although both persisters and desisters reported cross-gender identification, their underlying motives appeared to be different. The persisters explicitly indicated they felt they were the other sex. The desisters indicated that they identified.
If Apple thinks that they're the trans H-bomber guy, they're probably more right than they know, because H-bomber guy is a fucking cyberbully. And I don't know. Don't look into Essence of Thought's whole deal with someone called Rachel Oates if you don't want to think this person is very much also a cyberbully. That's all I'll say about that. Jesus Christ.
As a girlish boy or boyish girl who only wished they were the other sex.
But is that not what it is? So because they said it a different way? And they perhaps realized that after a while and that's why they desisted? But we load the dice so much more. Things like social transition, things like puberty blockers, and then hormones that they will overwhelmingly go onto. All this stuff loads the dice. So we're creating more persisters, practically.
End quote. It is these differences which were used by doctors to figure out which children would likely benefit from fully reversible puberty blockers, giving them 4 or more years to.
But it's all just what they say as well. It's just their testimony.
Work alongside doctors to reach an informed conclusion about whether HR.
And we're saying nothing, by the way, about whether children can really consent about any of this. There's no mention of that whatsoever. Really vile towards peak trans as well. I don't know about that. I'll have to look into it.
Was right for them, at which point most of said teens would have reached the age of full medical consent. And out of the children placed on said blockers, between 98 and 100% of them went on to further medically transition.
Yes, because it loads the dice. Because they've already been socially transitioned, most likely. They are being affirmed by everyone around them. And starting the process like that is going to also do that. Everything around you is affirming this choice that you're making. So to go against all of that, especially if you come out, say, in school, the idea that you might have to come back out again as not trans in a couple of years, that's fucking humiliating for some people. There's so many things that load the dice.
Now, people.
And by the way, the whole claim is that they desist when they go through puberty. So when you don't allow them to go through puberty, you're not giving them the chance to desist, if that makes sense. So, it's nuts. I don't know why she's bringing this up.
Like Rutledge have forwarded these statistics as if they're in opposition to one another, that if you take a wait-and-see approach, 85.1% of all trans youth desist, yet if you put them on blockers, 98 to 100% will persist.
Yes, because you're creating affirmation. You're loading the dice. This should be obvious, but this person would never entertain such an idea.
Implying that the blockers force trans youth to further transition. Except, we now know that that is not the case. The ones placed on blockers.
They don't force anyone. Who's saying they force anything? There's some videos. I'm going to have to look into that sometime.
Except, we now know that that is not the case. The ones placed on blockers are the ones who showed what we now recognize today as a key component of clinical gender dysphoria. They are the 14.9%. Know that that is not the case. The ones placed on blockers are the ones who showed what we now recognize today as a key component of clinical gender dysphoria. They are the 14.9% who persisted, meaning they have gone.
How are you making this? I'm sorry. I'm going to have to listen to this 10 times to try and understand what the fuck she's going on about.
Ones placed on blockers are the ones who showed what we now recognize today as a key component of clinical gender dysphoria. They are the 14.9% who persisted.
Are they? How do you know? And how can they be? When we're seeing more and more of these kids like starting to detransition now in like their late teens and early 20s.
Meaning they have gone through a medical screening process to ensure that they benefit.
The screening process, like, it's something you report. If your parent has an interest is invested in you being trans, and bear in mind they have to sign off on this shit as well because children cannot consent, then they're going to do that. Like, a child might not really have gender dysphoria, but be convinced they are for some reason. Maybe their friends are all doing it and they want to do it too. So they'll say what they need to say, or they'll convince their parents to do that on their behalf. All of these doctors, by the way, will strong arm your parents into agreeing that you need to transition by saying that you'll kill yourself, whether that's true or not.
From the medications. Puberty blockers don't cause medical transitioning any more than a plant.
It's not about causing it, Jesus Christ. It's about how it's a step in the chain, and every link in the chain brings you further down the path and creates more of this affirmation, creates more sunk cost fallacy, creates more confirmation bias.
Plaster cast causes broken bones. This is the survivorship bias in motion. Survivorship bias describes a logical error in which we focus on individuals, groups, or cases that have passed or survived some sort of selection process, whilst ignoring those who did not. You might have seen this chart before with the.
How many people these days get denied treatment, especially in like the US or something? How many of them?
Red dots depicting places US bombers had been damaged on bombing runs during World War II. Now, the US military wanted to reinforce the places with the clusters of red, since that's where the bombers arriving home were being hit the most. That's when a man by the name of Abraham Wald stepped forward to tell them to do the exact opposite. Why? Well, anti-air flak and machine guns aren't exactly precision weapons.
Either externally or internally, that leads to the risk of knocking a child's unfolding development off course. So you can kind of kick somebody to the curb if you disrupt them too much developmentally as they're growing. So let's just hold that in mind, and now let's zero in on the kids just before puberty.
Do I live in Texas? Nope, I am British, and I live in the UK. But hi, Dre Dog, I hope you're good.
And this is going to be a time when in our clinics, or on the internet, somebody is going to be presented with the option of puberty blockers, right? Just as they're about before entering Tanner stage 2. Now,
Wait, before entering Tanner stage 2? This audio sounds like, yeah, it's not great. I'm just trying to find, unless someone knows where the most pertinent part of this is. Or if I'm even looking at the right thing. I don't know. Pre-verbal children can signal they're in the wrong body. Okay, this is shorter. It might sound a bit better. Let's just do this one.
Okay, so the question is, what about the kids between 1 and 2 who are just developing language or may not even have it yet?
Why are we even asking this question?
They're very action-oriented. So, and at that time, this is where mirroring is really important and listening to actions. So let me give you an example. I have a colleague who's transgender, and there is a video of him as a toddler. So he was assigned female at birth. There's a video of him as a toddler tearing barrettes out of then her hair and throwing them on the ground.
Yep, that totally means that person is a male and has nothing to do with them potentially not liking things being in their hair or wearing things on their head. Sure.
And sobbing. That's a gender message. And when it happens not just once or twice,
That's a gender message. Can never be anything else, obviously. Jesus Christ.
Or 3 times, that's a gender message. Sometimes kids between the age of 1 and 2 with beginning language will say, I boy, when you say.
By the way, sorry, I forgot to mention, this is on a channel called Erin Brewer. There's actually a ton of like interesting stuff on this channel. I recommend anyone look this channel up, should I say. Really interesting.
Girl. Those 2 words, I boy. That's not a pre-verbal, but an early verbal message. It's...
Mate, my nephew has probably said all kinds of things like that. He talks so much at the moment, but he doesn't know words very well. So he kind of says a lot of stuff that isn't really anything. If you listen for the right things, you could probably hear what you want to hear. This is scary.
And sometimes there's a tendency to say, well, honey, no, you're a girl because little girls have vaginas and you have a vagina, so you're a
Who's saying that to their kid? No offense.
girl. And then when they get a little older, you hear them say, did you not listen to me? I said, I am a boy with a vagina, okay? But they can't say that
But there's no such thing.
between 1 and 2. But they can show you about what they want to play with, and if they feel uncomfortable about how you are responding to them and their gender, if you're misgendering them. So you look for
Seriously raised like autism. Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly.
those kinds of actions, like tearing a skirt off. There was one, I think this was in the Barbara Walters special, where this child wore the little onesies with snap-ups in between.
This is absolutely not any basis to start transitioning your child. Nuts.
The legs, and at age 1 would unsnap them to make a dress and have the dress flow. This was a child who was assigned male. That's a communication, a pre-verbal communication.
Person is fucking rank. Disgusting. Anyway, let's get back to Ethel, I guess. I know, the screening process seems fucking insane to me. Anyone can talk their way through it anyway. If it's anything like the UK one, if you know what things to say, you'll pass the screening process. Screening process is not really very thorough for this kind of thing. And all you can do is talk about your experience, because you can't see someone's gender identity. You can see their presentation, sure, but gender presentation isn't sex, and gender presentation doesn't make you the other sex. I don't know.
Red, since that's where the bombers arriving home were being groups or cases that have passed or survived some sort of selection process, whilst ignoring those who did not. You might have seen this chart before with the...
Yeah, the screening process seems completely batshit insane, so I have no idea why this person... Like, they obviously agree with it, so I guess that's why, but... I don't know. I don't know how anyone can listen to people talking about how your child might be transgender if they don't like barrettes in their hair and they're a girl, but hey. Presumably Ethel Thurston would hear that kind of thing and clap along. We're also still miles away from the title, by the way. We've perhaps correctly dealt with the 98% figure, and that's it.
The red dots depicting places US bombers had been damaged on bombing runs during World War II. Now, the US military wanted to reinforce the places with the clusters of red, since that's where the bombers arriving home were being hit the most. That's when a man by the name of Abraham Wald stepped forward to tell them to do the exact opposite. Why? Well, anti-air flak and machine guns aren't exactly precision weapons, therefore we'd expect to see an even distribution of damage across all bombers. The fact that we don't see that meant that the planes who got hit in the locations without the red dots were the ones who got hit and went down, never making it back, meaning they were never included in the sample. Only the planes who got hit in non-essential locations were able to make it back, marking the hotspots on these charts as low priority. Returning to puberty blockers, this also demonstrates how the claim that children are being pushed down a medicalized path by unscrupulous doctors is a lie. The vast majority of children sent to gender specialists, effectively handed to them on a silver platter, are sent away with no medical support.
What's this based on?
It's only the ones whose psychological distress marks them as a trans child that would benefit from medically transitioning handed to them is a lie. the vast majority of children sent to gender specialists, effectively handed to them on a silver platter, are sent away with no medical support. It's only the ones.
What I'm waiting for is a number up here to appear. Like, this person, for all their fucking many faults, they source their shit, or at least they pretend to, at the very least. But nothing is appearing here when they're making these claims. How do you know any of this? What are you basing this on?
Whose psychological distress marks them as a trans child that would benefit from medically transitioning, who were offered said support. This is a system working as it should.
What is any of this based on?
And in any other field of medicine would be viewed as a medical miracle. 98 to 100% of all trans youth put on blockers go on to further medically transition.
That's not a fucking miracle. That's like confirmation bias in action. What are you talking about?
With no known regret.
And now the sources are back. This is exactly what I mean. What she was just saying there, there's really no justification for. But now we're justifying this, where we say most kids that take puberty blockers go on to more things. That's ridiculous. Of course you can source that because no one's questioning that claim. To be honest, I thought it was less. I thought it was like 95%, and that was bad enough.
Compare that to, say, knee surgery, which has a 33.7% regret rate. Even if
Silly has no bearing on the fact that those are very different issues. No bearing on the fact that you might get knee surgery and not be happy with your results. You might also get trans surgery and not be happy with the results. But you're part of like a politicized group. You might feel like you can't say anything bad about it. You might feel like you have to only speak positively about it. And that's probably being reinforced by any other fucking trans people around you. Because we're a very politicized group. It's not a very trustworthy figure at all.
If we assume that the 2% who decide to not further medically transition regret going on
Tooling around, I think the basic idea is, well, if they weren't treated, they weren't trans. And if they were treated, they were trans, which is nuts. You can't do it that way.
blockers, that is a fraction of the pain suffered.
Nobody gets knee surgery unless you actually need it. Yep, true. If we started talking about cosmetic surgeries, would that be more accurate? Maybe. I'm not sure. There are two genders, creature, find God. I actually agree with you. Listen, I'm actually arguing against the TRA shit. Maybe if you listen longer, you'll understand.
By those who receive knee surgery, and yet no.
Okay, I'm an atheist. I'm not going to start believing in God anytime soon. But if you listen, you might realize that I'm kind of on your side in some ways. But hey, people don't always. People just want to go on vibes. Oh, you're trans. You must be crazy. I know.
Nobody is out there protesting knee surgery.
No one bullies people who regret their knee surgery. True. Oh my God, true. This is what I mean. We're a politicized group. There's an impetus for us to say things are good whether they are or not. And we don't actually know what's good for us, by the way. It might take you years to realize that you regret, like, a trans surgery. At which point, are you even part of a data set of any kind anymore? Probably not.
The only reason people go after puberty blockers is because they're used to improve the lives of trans people, and people like Rutledge.
That's retarded. You've not shown that.
Need trans people to suffer.
This is just about Rutledge. She needs trans people to... On what basis? Do you know this person?
Because, again, that's how they force us back into the closet.
I can steal man Ethel. Reuters reported 45k new kid gender patients, USA in 2022. That's insanely high. 4,500 on blockers and on hormones and 1,500 on blockers, but these stats seem unlikely. Fair enough.
To claim that we've been converted, repaired, or cured. Thankfully,
I get that. I just think it's funny to have these analogies where you correctly explain something like survivorship bias and then be like, it's like that. Yeah. It's because our shit doesn't make sense, so we have to constantly point to other things. There's a reason why these people use so many analogies. If our shit made more sense, we wouldn't need to analogize anywhere near as much, in my opinion.
Thankfully, you now know the science behind persistence and desistance rates, and can hopefully educate others who might be misled by bigots.
No, this is ridiculous. You've lied in your title. You have not debunked 61 to 98% of trans youth. What you've done is pointed out correctly that one person in an interview, that being this person here, said it was 2%, 98% should I say, which is based on just one part of a bigger meta-study, and then went on a bunch of guilt by association. So Ethel actually had kind of a point for maybe about this much of the video, maybe about a quarter to a third of the video, and they just went off the fucking rails. There we go, Essence of Thought. Interesting character, for sure. I can clear all this stuff off because it turned out that having the data handy was not even remotely necessary because her arguments are bullshit anyway. So amazing, amazing. Well done, Ethel. You really did it that time.